You're listening to Washington Watch. I'm Tony Perkins, your host. So good to have you with us. State legislatures around the country are responding to last fall's election. 43 states have introduced more than 250 bills to address, in part, the constitutional irregularities in last year's election that have left a cloud over the results. Of course, the left not happy with the states taking this action. Here's what Nancy Pelosi had to say.
Just last night, the Georgia House passed a draconian new voter restriction bill, which would end weekend voting, slash the number of mail ballot drop boxes, impose restrictive voter ID for mail ballots, among other actions. They know that their issues are losers with the American people when they oppose some of the issues that are very popular in the public domain. They know that big money and voter suppression is their path to victory. And that's why they're engaged in this. These voter suppression tactics are fundamentally discriminatory.
Joining me now is one of the state representatives from the state of Georgia that is leading this effort to secure elections by bringing back integrity. State Representative Barry Fleming, welcome to the program.
Tony, thanks for having me today.
So you're trying to protect losers? Is that what Nancy Pelosi is saying?
Well, it's hard to tell what Nancy Pelosi is saying, even when she's not wearing a face mask. And just in that brief clip you played, she said a couple of things that weren't true already. So hard to figure her out sometimes.
So let's talk about what you are doing. Obviously, Georgia was in the spotlight in the last election. A lot of concerns over the elections there and how votes were counted and how they were taken in and how people voted. What is the legislature doing there to address those concerns?
Well, as we all know, none of us have an election system designed to deal with a pandemic. And that is what we were struggling with in Georgia. And the results that it produced, our system, I guess you could say, was overwhelmed with the pandemic. And so we're trying to learn from those mistakes and figure out a way to make, as our governor puts it, easy to vote but hard to cheat. And so we have passed a few bills through the legislative process. We'll probably come up with something in the next month or so that we'll send to the governor for signature.
Are you pretty confident that you're going to prepare your system for another type of, not that we'll see an exact repeat of what we have with the coronavirus, but we've got to make sure that every vote counts and every vote that is voted is a legal vote. Are you pretty confident
Yes.
you're going to get there?
We think so. I mean, the problem we had is that we had a system that for a couple of decades, it worked pretty well. We constantly make adjustments to it. But just one example, absentee ballots in the state of Georgia had never been above 5% in the history of our state. And we saw on some occasions 30 or 40% of our voters were voting by absentee. We have something called a signature verification where you sign and they look at your signature to make sure you are basically who you say you are. That was never designed to deal with 1 million plus ballots. And the system was overwhelmed. So part of our legislation is to move away from a signature verification to something that is much more objective. Several other things in the legislation we're considering improves the system, we believe, but that would be one of the main examples.
So, Representative Fleming, if you go through this effort and you fix these areas that need to be fixed, if H.R. 1 that Nancy Pelosi is pushing passes, you simply, most of what you've done will be usurped by this federal legislation.
To a great extent, it would. Elections were meant to be run by the states for the most part, and that's exactly what the so-called H.R. 1 does. The good thing is that most people believe that its chances in the Senate aren't near as good as in the House. So we hope it doesn't pass, but it would be an incredible usurpation of states' authority to deal with elections.
So in light of that, how do your colleagues view what Washington is trying to do pertaining to election laws?
Well, it's a one size fits all. How often do we see that coming out of Washington, D.C.? What works well in Georgia in November may not work as well in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan when it's 0 degrees and snowing outside. To think that our elections work the same or should work the same in the 50 states is an oversimplification, which is only going to lead to many more problems. So it's our sincere hope that the United States Senate will not pass that, because we think each state ought to deal with their elections within some reasonable degree.
And I would agree 100% with you on that. State Representative Barry Fleming, thanks so much for joining us today, and thanks for your efforts there in Georgia leading the way on election integrity.
Thank you, Tony. Appreciate you having me today.
Absolutely.